Hello my friends, welcome to today's video. I'm Jeanette with Vivo Vintage Designs. In today's watercolor video, I'm going to do a little line and wash painting for you. You can see here I've transferred my image onto my Daler Rowney mixed media paper, and I'm using a Micron pen to outline the image. And I'm using a thicker nib for the outline. And then for the details that I'll be adding later on, I'll be using a Micron pen with a smaller nib. I'll also be using my Winsor & Newton professional paints. And you can take a look in the description box. I've listed some less expensive options for those of you who are beginners. The tubes that I purchase are purchased individually, and they can be a little pricey. Not too bad. There's other brands that are much more expensive, but if you're just starting out with watercolor, again, in the description box, I've listed some better options for the beginner that are more budget friendly. And all the products that you see me use here will be listed in the description box, so take a look if you're interested in purchasing them for yourself, or if you want more information about the products. And of course, as always, if you have any questions about any of the techniques you see me use in this video, please leave them in the comments. I'll always get back to you. And please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your interaction is very helpful to my channel and very much appreciated. It's also a very nice way to show your support. So you can see here I've added the outline with the thicker nib, and now I'm using the Micron pen with the smaller nib to add some shadow lines, and they're just lines and little dots, and I'm following the contour of the petals of each petal, making sure that my lines are going in the direction of the petal. And in the areas where there is shadow, I am adding more lines. And in the leaves, I've added some detail too. You can add as much or as little detail as you like. Now here in the center of the flower, I'm drawing some little circles. I know it's a little hard to see, but this is I always pronounce this wrong. And the flower is called anemone, I believe. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. So it's got this beautiful center with the filaments and the anthers that stand out from the flower. And I'm just using the fine tip of my Micron pen to draw those lines. And just a little circle with a line through it for the anthers. And you can see here I'm adding the details in the leaves. So I'm making a broad center vein, adding some lines, and then in between those lines, I'm adding shorter lines. You can see the center vein is rather open, and then I'm extending the lines from that center vein to the outside of the petal. And in this twisted one, or rather turned a leaf, I'm doing the same and making sure that I follow the center vein on the back side of that leaf. So these little paintings are fun to do. They're pretty simple. And they're very relaxing to do also. I really enjoy doing these line paintings. In fact, I liked this one so much that I thought to leave it without any color because I thought it stood out well enough on its own. But I decided to add a little bit of color. And you can see here I'm adding a light consistency. I think this is alizarin crimson. I only used like 3 colors for this painting: alizarin crimson, sap green, and a little Payne's gray, where I wanted to darken the color a little bit for the shadows. So you can see I went down the entire petal, and then I went along the edge of the petal using a heavier consistency and allowing it to blend. And then for some of the other petals, I just used a wash, rather. I dampened the area with water and just added the pink along the edges and allowed it to blend, and that's called the wet and wet technique. And then using the tip of my brush to move that pigment around and making sure that I continue to blot my brush so that I don't have too much water in it. So you can see the paper towel in my left hand, and I'm constantly blotting my brush, making sure that I don't have too much water in the brush, because that can definitely ruin the painting and it can cause blooms, which in some cases are very pretty, but not for this particular style of painting. So you can see here I've wet the leaf with a very, very light consistency of the sap green, and then I picked up a heavier consistency of the sap green, made sure that I blotted my brush, and then I went along the edges to deepen the color there. So here I just wet down the petal, the entire petal, making sure that the other petals nearby were dry, and then picked up a heavier consistency of the alizarin crimson and went around the outside. And here I'm just repeating the same exact process, making sure to be careful not to paint over the center of my flower and those delicate little lines that I drew for the center. And these brushes that I'm using are by Anna Mason, by Rosemary & Co. And these are great brushes for floral illustrations or paintings. They have very short bristles, which give you a lot more control, especially if you're a beginner. This is a really nice option. I also have another set of brushes which are very similar and were less expensive. I'll be sure to link those in the description box in case you want to take a look. I find that using these shorter bristles allows me more control, and it's almost like drawing. So something you might consider if you're just starting with alcohol inks. Listen to me, with watercolor. Also, this paper, this mixed media paper by Dale Rowney, allows you to blend the colors really nicely. So again, if you're a beginner, you don't need to spend a lot of money on watercolor paper. I prefer to use 100% cotton watercolor paper, but for painting this small, it's really not necessary. And this paper, for some reason, allows you to blend your colors really nicely. So I've used other mixed media papers, and they don't work as well. This brand, for some reason, I don't know why, works really, really well with this technique. It did take me 2 weeks to receive it though, but I definitely need to order more because I enjoy working on this paper for small paintings like this. So you can see in some of these leaves, I am darkening that center vein. I want it to stand out a little bit more. And again, I'm darkening just the edges of the leaf and then blending it in with the water. And if you find some areas are a little too dark, all you have to do to lift that paint is clean your brush. Make sure you dab it on your paper towel to remove any excess moisture. Go over the area with just clean water that you want to lighten, and then use your paper towel to blot it up. And you can see how I lifted the color in the previous petal I was painting. And now for this area here, because this is the underside of the petal, I did add a little bit of Payne's Gray to my alizarin crimson just to deepen the color a little bit. And I'll be doing the same on the underside of this petal as well. So I'm just going around the edges. You can see there that I've added the Payne's Gray. It's a little bit darker, a little bit more purplish. And you can see here that in some areas that are already dry, I can still dampen my brush with making sure that there's not too much moisture, and I can still blend the colors together even though they're dry by just using a damp brush. And that's what's really nice about this paper, is that it allows you to do that. And here I've just wet down the entire petal again. I wanted to deepen the color on the edges. So I've picked up a heavier consistency of the alizarin crimson with a little bit of the Payne's gray, just to deepen the tips of the petals. And I'm doing the same in this petal here. And very carefully going in between the filaments and the anthers of the center. Now for this leaf, I wanted the underside of the leaf to be darker. So I've wet down the part of the leaf that is facing you, and I tried to maintain that area a little bit lighter than the underside of the leaf. And now I'm just filling in the stem, and I'm using sap green in a very light consistency. And then I'm going to mix a little bit of the Payne's gray with the sap green to use for my shadow, and you'll see me do that in just a moment. So here I've added a little bit of shadow. You can see that it's a little bit darker, and I'm applying it to the underside of the stems, and now I'm going through the center vein of some of the leaves as well to deepen the color a little bit and add a little shadow. And then I'm taking a damp brush and I'm blending that shadow mix into the rest of the stem. And you can see it's very easy. I'm just using the tip of my brush with some clean water on it. And again, you can see the paper towel in my left hand that I keep blotting my brush on. And I just added a little bit of the alizarin crimson to that bud. And now I'm using the Payne's gray to paint in those filaments and the anthers as well. And I'm using a teeny tiny brush, the set that I purchased from Amazon of these are the ones by Anna Mason, by Rosemary & Co. It's a set of 4 brushes, and they are really tiny brushes. Some of them are really tiny, and they allow you to create some detail, some really fine detail. Now that the painting is dry, I'm going over some of the filaments and anthers and some of the details that I thought needed a little bit more. When I painted over them, I thought they didn't stand out as much, so I just went over some of the areas, and now I'm using a white gel pen to add a little bit of highlight to those filaments and the center of the flower and the anthers. Just a little dot. And because this pen is water soluble, you can, if you add too much or you don't like the way it looks, you can just go over it with a damp brush and remove some of that color. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed this tutorial. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I hope you give this a try, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Enjoy your day. Bye.